Okay, we are streaming. A couple more people joining.
Okay, we don't have anywhere to go, so it's on your timeline. Just love a malka, but that can happen for the next 4 hours.
All right, let's kick off. My name is David Pardo. For those of you here for the first time, excited to kick off this episode of In Conversation. Very excited to introduce Rabbi Rafi Lipner. Rabbi Rafi Lipner is the rabbi of Shaarei Tefillah in Toronto.
He's a good friend. He's a good friend. Start with just as a good friend.
A dear friend. He's a dear friend. He's the rabbi of Shaarei Tefillah in Toronto, which is somewhere on Bathurst and something, if I recall correctly. He started out his career in Chinuch as a teacher at Shat, and by many accounts was the most popular teacher there. He began out of an outpouring of, chesed, or just actually being tuned into what his students wanted and needed, started an after-school club for his students that morphed into Toronto's premier young adult education organization and community, the House. Most rabbis, I have to tell you, for those of you not in the biz, start out trying to make their mark either in the world of chinuch or in shul rabbanis or in organizational work. I believe what Rav Rafi pulled off is called a hat trick. For those of you who follow hockey, it's a very big deal. And I have to indulge myself because one of the things I learned from Rav Rafi is the importance of the right introduction. I just want to pardon me for the extra. But in Pirkei Avos it says, "Aseh lecha rav uknei lecha chaver." The chaver of mine pointed out a while ago. It's kind of interesting. Aseh for rav, knei for chaver. Make yourself a rabbi and buy yourself, acquire yourself. Why is it not the same lashon? Why is there a distinction in the language? He pointed out, a friend is someone that there's an exchange. You know, I do for you, you do for me. We don't keep track, we're friends, but there's definitely like a symmetry in exchange. A rav, you could never possibly, what a rav gives you, you could never possibly give back. And I think I speak on behalf of thousands of people that Rav Rafi has, whose lives he's touched and in totally different, wide-ranging parts of the Jewish community, in saying that Rafi is the kind of Rav that you have to be aseh. You could never be knei. You can't give back to Rav Rafi what he gives to us. Without further ado, please welcome Rav Rafi Lipner.
Ouch. You didn't even ask for an introduction, so I figured there would be nothing. But I'm mochel you just because I see there's a frame saying Saft on there, and I imagine that's my mother. So, Mom. Ari actually sent me an email before and saying, or we were speaking before, it says, all you can say is a good friend and an emergency doctor. That's all I got for Ari. Dave, it's great to see you, and thank you so much for the opportunity. And for those who don't know, Rav David spent a year or two up here in Toronto. It was one of the first people we hired to be involved with that organization he spoke about, and he still has a tremendous, there's a void in Toronto, him not being here, but he's doing tremendous things for Klal Yisrael in the most creative and authentic way, and it's great to be reunited with him. So thank you, Rav David, and look forward to getting you back for that one.
Always consider myself an honorary Canadian.
Ari, so for the next 40 minutes, so I don't have to introduce you because this is a big covet. Ari and I, it's true. He's just a really dear friend, and we wanted this opportunity. I wanted this opportunity. Sometimes the friends that you know and you get the opportunity. I learn with Ari, once a week before Shabbos going in, and we've been chaverim for many years. But I, as I said to him, I don't really know where he comes from, what turned him into the type of person. Very often in Rabbanos, you sort of see people in the tail end and you just sort of understand who they are, and I'm sure we'll discuss a little bit. I mean, I don't know how you fit into a day, what you do aside from the crazy schedule of emergency doctor and the different organizations that you're involved with. So I thought maybe we just start from the beginning. All right. I know very little about, when you sort of started on the trajectory of being such what I call a refuas hanefesh and refuas guf doctor. Somebody who both in the side of the spiritual side and the physical side. So why don't you take us a little bit back, because I know everyone's got a journey. Everyone has some challenges in the beginning, and I know that you faced the big one in there. And in some ways, I don't know if it started from there, it came before that. So I'll turn it over to you for a little bit, Art.
So thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to have this conversation. There's an age-old teaching in in medical school, you learn that after a night shift, you're not supposed to commit to anything or make any decisions. And so this all came about in a conversation I had with my dear friend Rabbi Rafi after a night shift, and I'm here because of you. So thank you for that, and I'm sure I won't regret it, but a little part of me might. I don't think of my story as all that exciting, but I think that what inspired me most, if I go back to my medical school essay, after applying to medical school, you have to say, like, why did you want to be a doctor? What inspired you? And without a doubt, growing up in a home of a family doctor who was very committed to serving his patients had the greatest influence on me in terms of the trajectory that I took. I grew up in a home, a lot of family doctors nowadays, have a clinic and they go home and that's it. My father is still a family doctor who up until COVID was doing house calls regularly. We would have people come to our home on a regular basis in the evening time to see him. We had an office in the basement where he would see people. And that had a profound impact on me, just seeing how he cared for people. And it wasn't just about, the medical side of things. He would always make people laugh and make them feel better. And seeing the impact that he was able to have on so many people in such a meaningful way had and still has a lasting impact on me. As Rabbi Rafi alluded to, so when I was in my undergraduate years, in my second year of undergraduate studies, where I was kind of on the track to becoming hopefully a physician. I thought I wanted to be, but you never know how things are going to turn out. I had an experience. I was, started out with, I was having some shortness of breath and chest pains. I didn't know what it was. I thought of myself as quite a fit person, and I was playing basketball, I remember, and I would get very easily winded, 20 years old. And I thought something was wrong. I didn't know what it was. I went to my father, and he said, "Well, come to my office. You'll get a chest X-ray." So I went to his office, and I remember the look on his face when he saw that X-ray. It was I'll never forget that look on his face. I had a big mass in my chest, and within a few days, I was diagnosed as having non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and so I went through a course of chemotherapy and radiation, and I wouldn't say that had a profound impact on me ultimately choosing medicine per se, but it certainly did have and still has an impact on how I approach how I do what I do. And what I mean by that is, you see people. I work as an emergency physician, and you see people all the time, and everybody's got their challenges. Everybody's going through stuff. It doesn't always seem like that on the surface, but everybody has their difficulties, their challenges. And when I see people in the emergency department, it's usually the scariest day of their life. And being able to relate to what it feels like to be in that vulnerable position and be afraid. I'm not saying it. I would love to say that this is something I come into work every day and this is the consciousness that I have. But on my best days, on my good days, I certainly bring that consciousness of understanding and appreciating where people are coming from, what they're dealing with, and I try to bring that into the patient-doctor relationship in any way that I can. And I have a lot of great mentors who teach me the same thing. But we say, the Torah talks about that we always are reminded that we were once slaves in Egypt. And I think having had the experience, so we have to be nice to Gerim because we were once Gerim in a different land. So, I think every physician will tell you that once they're on the other side of the gurney, so to speak, or on the other side of the patient-physician relationship, it changes them a little bit, and they have a bit of a different approach. And so that certainly had a profound impact on how I still, I think, approach those relationships.
What I think is, so a couple of weeks ago, so everyone, the in thing is to get tested these days as often as you can. So one of our daughters we were pretty certain came down with COVID. We thought we all had it because, to be honest, we were out playing Twister that night, which is the probably worst thing to play when you have a kid who has COVID. So we called Ari because, just like Ari said, his father was like that. We've had stitches done in his living room, in his top room, the whole shul, everybody. It probably has more emergency room calls inside his own home than he does at the several hospitals that he works at. But when we went up there to get COVID, tested all of our kids, we got through special room. And one thing that stuck with me, Ari, you speak about, being on the other side is we walked up to triage and they're like, oh yeah, Dr. Greenwald's got somebody that he's helping. There was like a nuance that we just expect, Ari to be the kind of guy that's doing that and seeing you in sort of that environment. And really, there's a diversity of people. And I know, some things are coming to mind now, which I'd love you to talk about. The role that you play is being someone who's Mekadesh Shem Shamayim. I think you take that very seriously. And, even if you touch upon perhaps maybe, I don't remember the details, there was a program that you did together with Israelis and Arabs, I think that you brought them up to, Toronto for some sort of fellowship. Or even, the WhatsApp, podcast or the, message that you sent out and some of the responses on that. So let's start. I don't remember what that project was or how that came about, but you see your role as being able to spread, goodness and what it means to really be, Mamlachas Kohanim B'Goy Kadosh as a.
I think I don't. Thank you for that, Rabbi. It means a lot coming from you, but I think that, like, I going through medical school, again, this is something I learned from my father. I wore kippah all the time. I wore kippah through residency and in my practice. And so I was always identifiable as a Jew. I never thought otherwise. Although I remember when I had my medical school interview, I had a debate in my mind of whether I should wear a kippah or not wear a kippah. Are they going to want me to be in medical school because I'm wearing a kippah, or are they not going to want me because I said, Hashem's going to want me to just be me, and I'll just do that, and we'll see how that goes. So
I can't say that ever happened with my interview for the pulpit. I just didn't have that same sort of challenge.
But I think anybody who's gone through the process as a in any kind of professional environment, you always kind of debate, like, should I wear my identity on my sleeve or not? And I made the decision early on that that's what I would do. And I don't think I fully appreciated how much it would impact how I approached what I do and how I behave. But I feel very much that when I'm at work and wearing a kippah amongst mostly non-Jews, that I'm not just representing myself and my family, but that I'm representing everybody and the Jewish values that we hold dearly. So I'd like to think that I'd like to say that I'm always exemplary in that regard. It's something that I consistently aim to do in the best way possible, and I'm cognizant of the heavy weight that sometimes carries, especially when you're dealing with some people who you would, on the surface, assume that they have a certain view of what a Jew is and what a Jew is not. And so that's when I, go kind of double down on my Jewish values and my Jewish identity. So when I, see somebody with a swastika tattooed on their arm, I'm extra careful I'm going to be extra nice in that case, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but to me, that's the answer. So you mentioned this program. Look, I think when you're in medicine, you have the benefit of being able to be privy to a lot of people's secrets and vulnerabilities. People who I've never met come to me, and I know everything about their deepest, darkest issues and fears more than sometimes their best friend. I mean, they're telling, I hear about people considering suicide or having drug addiction issues, or coming clean on their alcohol addiction that their spouse might not even know about. So you have this, it's a real honor really to be in that relationship sometimes at a crucial time in their life. And when you are in that situation, I find that you recognize that we all have so much more in common than what differentiates us. Health and medicine has the ability to bridge gaps and find common ground in a way that a lot of other things don't. And I had the opportunity when I was a resident in the emergency medicine program in Toronto to work with some great mentors and teachers who had created a program which was aimed at bringing Palestinians and Jordanians and Canadians and Israelis together for what's called a Peace Through Health initiative. And the goal was to bring all these, medical students together, these future leaders in their respective communities together, and just to recognize that, we all have a common goal, which is pursuit of health, and through that common ground to find, areas where we can work together. And I was a facilitator in that program, but it certainly gave me a view and an opportunity to see how many differences really can fall to the wayside when you're able to recognize what the common ground is. And even you would think amongst Palestinians and Israelis and Jordanians and Canadians coming together, these people live together and had difficult decisions. They didn't agree on everything, but they all developed a great deal of respect and still have ongoing relationships because of that program. And so that's something I'm very proud of for having been a part of.
I remember Ari and I have had the privilege of doing lots of things together, running a short marathon where he kept giving me chizik that I shouldn't give up. He said, imagine it's like Yom Kippur and you're almost done at the end. And one of the trips that we took together to Hebron on the way back, I remember on the plane, we didn't fly back together, but I met someone who was the executive director of Magen David Adom. And something he said to me on that plane, he says, you've always got to think about short is 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. I'm embarrassed, but thanks for asking, David Pardo, in the notes. But as I'm coming home, he says, you know what? This guy, Rafal Herbst, the great guy, he said, whatever work you do, you've always got to think about what is the unique thing that you add to the work that you do. So there's lots of people, with all due respect, Ari, that are emerged doctors. There's lots of people that are involved in medicine. But I think one of the things that, I find really, admirable about so many of the things that you do, but I think it stems in many ways from one line. So Ari, for those who don't know, he also happens to be not only, like I said, Refuas HaGuf, but Refuas HaNefesh. He became our Baal Tefillah to Shul, from cold, not really doing it so much at all, to Musaf, Kol Nidre, the whole gamut. The whole gamut. He left one little piece for me, Neila, and he basically, agreed to take the rest. Not that he was saying, I've got to do it, but really, if you need someone, I'd be happy to. And one of the lines that he stops on is part of the singing at the end after Sim Shalom, if I remember correctly, on not the Avinu Malkeinu, but, V'chalot kol dever, and the words V'sinas chino me'aleinu, he sings it like mamash so beautifully. So I think that the Avas Yisrael. So I want to touch on something, Ari, that I don't think we ever spoke about, but I mentioned about that note that you made. So at the beginning of when COVID was just coming out and we had lots of conversations, and everyone listening here knows that there's so many different machlokas that can happen around this. And Ari just went home one day, and one night, probably after a shift, just like felt something. And you can't, in today's day and age, viral isn't about something that you plant. It's authenticity. So can you just speak a little bit to, that message he said, what happened? Because he spoke about got translated and where it came from.
Sure, Rafa. You should know that my favorite part of Yom Kippur is your Neila. It's always the best. So that was an interesting experience to be a part of. Really, I feel like I was a bit of a spectator to that whole process myself. I'm not sure exactly where to start, but I was asked to take on the role of a Hatzalah medical director in Toronto about 2 years ago now. We all know Hatzalah, hopefully, and they do great things. Volunteers who give themselves 24/7. So people who, they're sitting down for soup, Friday night dinner with their family, the phone goes and the walkie-talkie goes and they don't think twice and they leave. And they go help people, whatever the call is. So when I was asked to help out and to be the medical director, I said, after running through the family and making sure that it was going to be okay, I said it would be an honor to just be associated with people like this who are most nefesh in such a way for the health of others, Jews and non-Jews alike. So that led to an opportunity, an occasion where there was a period of time before COVID, if we remember what was happening before, there was this big measles kind of scare within Jewish communities, and there was a concern that some people weren't vaccinated, and so as the medical director of Hatzalah, I was in a unique position, had an opportunity to get to work with people and various community leaders to come together to create some vaccine clinics for our Jewish community here in Toronto, which was a very successful campaign. And that kind of put me into a role, really for my first time, I feel like, of somewhat playing some kind of leadership role specifically within the Jewish community, which was a great honor to work with so many great people in that way. And so what followed from that, a year later, we're kind of entering the throes of what we didn't know at the time, but now COVID, and being in emergency position at that time, there was a swell of like fear and anxiety that was building. We were hearing reports from our colleagues in Italy about what they were facing and the onslaught of disease and illness and suffering. And it seemed like it was just moving our way, and it didn't seem like we were really ready for it. And so some leaders in the medical community in Toronto, and I kind of had already had a kind of conversation chat going from back at the measles vaccine campaign. And so there were some conversations, and these are people much smarter than me in infectious disease and public health, who were talking about these concerns, and it didn't seem like it was enough happening to prevent what could have potentially happened here in Toronto. And so this fear is building and this anxiety is building, and at the time Toronto was open to business and travel, and it seemed like as a Jewish community we were particularly vulnerable, and we were starting to hear news of what's happening in New York at the time, because New York got hit very hard a few weeks before us, and so this this fear and anxiety and concern is building, and during this time there was some ongoing conversations that my medical colleagues and I were having with leaders from the Jewish community in Toronto, trying to find a way if we could proactively start to shut some things down, because we didn't really know what we were dealing with, but we knew what was happening in other places, and we knew that it was really bad, and the city wasn't shutting down, and malls were open, and movie theaters were open, and people had the mentality, well, the public health, they're going to protect us, the city's going to protect us, we're not going to impose upon ourselves to close down our own yeshivas, our own shuls, unless we have to, which was the mentality at the time. And so there was these ongoing conversations and discussions with rabbinic leadership across Toronto, and all the while I'm going to work in the emergency department and seeing, a lot of people who were coming in with what seemed like COVID, but we weren't even testing for it at the time, because we were only testing for people who had fever and cough and shortness of breath. And as we all know now, there's a lot of other symptoms that we were clearly missing. And so this is happening at work, and I'm seemingly seeing a lot of people with COVID, but the numbers that we're looking at on in the city of Toronto or Canada, like the numbers don't reflect how bad it really seems in the front lines. And then these conversations are ongoing with all these Jewish community leaders who are holding as we know, right, you're having minyan three times a day, you're learning in yeshivas, you're going to school. It's like we're not a people who keep to ourselves. We're people who congregate often and frequently, and it's an important part of our lives. And so I had a particular concern for the Jewish community and how hard we had the potential to get hit, and how hard our Jewish family in New York was getting hit at the time. And I remember hearing this brief voice message from a Hatzalah member in Borough Park about the challenges that we're facing. I have like shivers just thinking about it, about how hard they were being hit, and how much he wished we could have, he was sending a message out like, please, like, take this seriously. And that was the night I heard that message. And then I went to a shift, and I was seeing all these people who were coming in, who we weren't testing for COVID at the time, but clearly had COVID. And then I was also seeing a lot of people who were coming in with their partners. And one partner clearly had COVID, and the other partner was living with them it was completely asymptomatic, and there wasn't any knowledge, confirmation about asymptomatic transmission, but there were clearly people who were living together where one person had it and the other person didn't, and they were together for a week with symptoms. And so all this stuff is building, and I wasn't sleeping a lot during the day because I'm doing consecutive nights, and I'm have this increasing concern based on the medical leadership and professionals about what should happen, what could happen, and the challenges of trying to convince Jewish leadership about what needed to happen urgently and the urgency of it. And so that all kind of built up until I came home from my shift, and I was depleted of energy, and all the conversations with Jewish leadership kind of fell flat. Nobody was really interested in moving unless they were forced to close down institutions. And so as kind of a last ditch effort, I sat in my car before going into my home to take a nap after a long shift, and I recorded that message really as kind of just a plea to the Jewish community leadership that this is something that we need to take seriously, and I felt that this was an important message that they needed to hear so that they could change the course of what could potentially happen. What happened after that was I went to sleep, and then I woke up, and all of a sudden that had traveled literally around the world, and kind of the rest is history. Although an interesting part of that that I found amazing was that I was getting messages from people in Arab countries in the Middle East. I remember, who wanted to translate that message into Arabic and Spanish, and anybody. I mean, I said yes to everybody. So the fact that this Jewish doctor in Toronto, I introduced myself as the medical director of Hatzalah because I was speaking to the Jewish community in Toronto specifically, but the fact that message from the Jewish medical director of Toronto, of Hatzalah, made it to these Arab countries and was translated into Arabic, and potentially had an impact on the messaging there. That touched me, and that, I think, just I don't have words for what happened. It certainly wasn't a planned event. It wasn't a recorded message that I intended to go anywhere beyond our Jewish community, but clearly there were other plans.
Well, I remember actually in the beginning of that started, one of the things he had said to me, he said, if we do our job well, everyone's going to be like, oh, what are you going crazy for? Like you were clearly wrong. In many ways, I think Toronto, in the position that you played, and I say this sincerely, Baruch Hashem, like we had it pretty mild. Okay, we can all make the jokes if you're following our news that we're not going to get vaccines till like 2023 up here. So that's a separate problem, but that's not Ari's problem. But in terms of how we've weathered the storm over here, it really has been, very mild. But at the same time, I know that, one of the other qualities that comes out, I'm sure people have touched upon, I've clued into that, the way you speak, is the humility. Like, I was blessed or whatever, I don't know. Like, so, when you deal with humility, especially during this time period, with COVID, and doctors in general, the famous, in Kedushin, Tov Shebarofim LeGehenim, that the best of the doctors are on the way to Gehenim, and one of the, explanations are because there's Gaiva. They feel that they can control everything. Just curious what how you sort of feel when you come to something where this is the only time you've experienced where really, with all due respect, you're clueless, like you said, you don't know what to do. How does that impact the work that you do, the conversations that you have with people? I'm curious how you're processing that.
You mean with respect to COVID specifically, or you mean just in general when I don't know when I'm not 100% sure about what's happening? Because that happens a lot. Look, I think in medicine, there's a lot of different approaches that people have in terms of how to approach the patient-physician relationship, and some of it kind of depends on how you read the patient. Sometimes you see somebody and it seems like they just want to be told what to do. They want to know that you're like the best doctor in the world and you got everything figured out and you know everything. I'm a little uncomfortable projecting that, just because that's not the reality. But sometimes people just want to know that they're in secure hands. And in the emergency department, we deal with a lot of the unknown. A lot of times when people leave the emergency department, they don't have a diagnosis of what's happening. they have a diagnosis. They have some reassurance that it's nothing dangerous, it's nothing life-threatening. Certainly, if it's something clearly life-threatening or dangerous, that's where our skill set, plays a major impactful role. But a lot of times we don't know exactly what's happening. And how do you convey that in a way that also gives people reassurance and doesn't make them think that you don't know what you're talking about is a bit of an art. But I think, when I went into emergency medicine, and people who watch, the shows in emergency medicine, you think that, it's all about saving lives and, doing these heroic acts. And when that happens, certainly, that's a favorite part of what we do. We're known as adrenaline junkies, and that's a reality. Like we feed off that adrenaline, and when things go into chaos mode, we step up and we try to do everything we can to calm it down and to address the life-threatening urgencies as they come about. But most of the time, we're not dealing with that. And this is actually what I tell all my Hatzalah, all the Hatzalah units that work under me. You go in, sometimes you go into this, paramedic role or emergency medicine role, and you're like, I'm so passionate. I just want to save a life. I want to save a life. And when that happens, it's amazing. And you have a huge impact. But the reality is the majority of the time, what I do in my day-to-day, what the Hatzalah units that work do on a day-to-day basis is you ease, anxiety and fear. And you play that human role of people come in and they think they're dying most of the time. And most of the time they're not. And so how you approach that and how you make them understand that, I understand your fears and concerns, and I'm certainly going to address those in every way possible. And at the end of the day, I might not know exactly what's happening, but I'm going to make sure that it's nothing dangerous, and we're going to make sure you get some follow-up. And what you do in that human interaction of alleviating those fears, those anxieties, addressing those difficulties, those challenges, I think that's the value that most of us bring to that. And so that's something I try to stay mindful of. And on my good days, I'm mindful of it. And I certainly have, challenging interactions like everybody else, and it doesn't always go the way you plan. And sometimes people have expectations that you just can't provide. But when you talk about humility, the reality is that I there's things that I know and there's things that I don't know. And I think in medicine in particular, like everything else, it's important to know what you know, and what you don't know, it's even more important to know that. So I try to be mindful of that and what I can do and what I can't do, and at the same time bring that human element into that interaction in my good moments, and when I'm cognizant of that, to recognize that really it's about alleviating their fears and treating their pain and addressing their concerns in the most real and authentic way possible.
That's interesting. In this past week's Parsha, I just saw a beautiful shot. My wife called attention to it from the Rav. And so he speaks about how when Moshe is sitting there, Yom B'Layla, and Yisro comes up and says, like, what are you doing? You can't do all. So, he said, the Rav said, what was he busy doing all day? He says, we think, initially we're thinking it's all court cases. He says, what kind of court cases? Like, how much did they have with them? No one was in business. He said what he was actually doing is he was listening to people. He says, you think about the fact that they just got out of Mitzrayim. Most of them lost, if 4/5 they were cousins, relatives, family that were there. They came out of 200 years of slavery. Like, it's not like as soon as they got on the other side of the Yam Suf, they were like, that's it. And emotionally, they were 100% healthy. And we see how difficult it was to get out of them. He said all Moshe was doing, the majority of his time, is he was just a source of strength by being able to listen and understand that, he was there for them and what they were going through. And, that what you're saying really resonates on that front. It reminds me actually of something else that I don't know if it came out of that message that you sent, but the importance of connectivity and that sort of amazing domino effect with, I think, Bell Canada. Bell's our Verizon up here in Toronto. That's like sort of the main provider. So I can't remember, something happened over there. I don't remember the details of that, but you called somebody something like, what was that?
So early on, we were dealing with a lot of challenges when we were working in the emergency department. And one of them was that we depend a lot on having family members around at the bedside. And families, find it very meaningful to be there with their loved ones especially when they're very sick. and you know, a lot of fears about what's going to happen, and the patients, you know, draw a lot of strength from having family members around. So one of the really difficult things that was not having patients and families be able to be together, because we had these no patient visitor policies in across hospitals everywhere and long-term care facilities. And it was really hard as a physician, and talking with my colleagues and nurses, to deal with this, you know, where people are coming in, you know, from a physician standpoint, we don't even, like, there's half the story that we might not even know, because we don't have a family to provide it, and the patient may not be able to provide it for us. And so we're having to talk to them on the phone outside of a room, and, you know, and then you're dealing with challenging situations of having to intubate people. People are critically ill, and it's just painful to be talking to a family member, and they're saying, tell my mother I love her, you know, and that might be the last thing that they ever hear. And it was taking a huge toll and burden on us and family members and patients. And so it seemed apparent, and up to many of us, that we needed to create, you know, some kind of way for people to be able to connect. You know, we have, you know, devices where we can do this more easily. And so we, myself and several colleagues, came up with some initiative that where we would try to put wireless devices, tablets, and phones into various emergency departments, long-term care facilities, ICUs, and places, so that there could at least be a virtual connection, so that people could, you know, see and talk to their family members, and we could also be a part of that in a way that would benefit patients and families and healthcare providers. And so Bell Canada was the first one to step on to say, actually through a connection within our Jewish community, who came on to say, you know, we'll provide SIM cards and free data to help make this happen.
You find, I mean, one of the things that I find amazing is that, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of coming up with the idea and going forward, and people, like you said, want to help. You must have ideas, you know, of things that you still want to do. You know, you don't take on, when you're doing all that you're doing, saying, yeah, I'll take on Hatzalah, like Toronto. I know that there are Americans listening over here, and anything outside of like the New York tri-state area or Florida or Chicago, you know, Canada's got us, like, Baruch Hashem, it's a very large, you know, active community, hundreds of thousands of Jews in cities of millions of people. So you don't take those things on because you've got nothing to do. You take them on, as they say, you give a busy person something, you know, if you want to get it done. Just curious, you know, what are some of the things that you're still got in your, you know, bucket list to do, or projects that you wish you could see and you know, might actually come to fruition over time?
It's a good question. I don't have anything that comes to mind right now, to be honest. I'm just trying to get through the day most times. So I find there's not a lot of time right now to be thinking beyond, you know, what might happen one day when we're not dealing with a pandemic and all the challenges that people are dealing with. But I would say, you know, generally speaking, things that I'm most passionate about and that I connect to are things that bring people together, where people find common ground and where everybody feels like they're getting more out of it than they're giving. And so those are the types of projects that I'm most drawn to.
Sorry, you just you froze for us a little bit.
Oh.
You know, so I guess one more thing that, yeah, I don't have to deal with the struggle that struck us, and my wife and I were talking about when we came back from the Emerge room that time, is that we sort of live, you know, I think rabbis have the benefit, you know, between the work that we do, to always sort of live in a bubble where we're constantly sort of, you know, connected to, you know, the values and what's important. And then, you know, what's so shocking is we walk into, you know, the Emerge and we realize, wait, there's a whole different world that you operate in. And I guess, you know, balance, you know, for our side, it's to stay normal and realize that people are dealing with their life outside of, you know, what happens in shul. And, you know, obviously there's conversations that we have to get to know, like you said, sometimes, you know, the insides of what's going on. But what are the things that keep you, you know, as grounded as possible? I think that, you know, one of the biggest challenges that people face, and one of the, you know, the other beautiful aspects of your personality is that, you know, sometimes people get so involved out there, but the things you never wavered on, and yeah, of course you wear a kippah when you go in and do what you have to do. And of course you find time to learn, like, what keeps you grounded so that you don't just take this is my role, and when I can, I do it. What are some of those grounding principles that you have?
No.
That's a great question. I think the role that Judaism plays and the Jewish lifestyle plays in my life is something that keeps you Shabbos keeps me grounded. The fact that through medical school and residency, when everybody else was working 24/7, I had a forced time to spend with my family and the people I love, and to try to connect with Hashem and all that is I think anybody who works in a professional life and career, other than maybe rabbis, because I don't know, when you're the rabbi, that's kind of like a busy day for you, but I would say Shabbos keeps me grounded, and friends and family. I think you go through experience like a pandemic that we're all going through, and you start appreciating the things that are really valuable in your life, and the things that give your life the most meaning. And I think those are all the things that keep me grounded in a day-to-day basis. But at the same time, look, I have it's probably similar to you, Rabbi. You have the opportunity, you have this window into how other people live their lives, and the fact that the things that you see on the surface are often like just the tip of the iceberg. And so on a daily basis, I get a dose of perspective when I'm open to it. You see people go through tragedies and challenges, and it's no different. I'm sure it's even more so. As a Rav, working in a community the way you do, and the way that you service people with such heart, perspective, I think is everything. And on my best days, I have a perspective of appreciation and gratitude for what I have, instead of focus on things that I wish I had, or the wish I was, or that I wish were part of my life, and that certainly keeps me grounded.
So I see we've got 2 minutes till our 9 o'clock time. So I'll just ask for an eitzah, I guess, for myself and for everyone that's out there. I think speaking of the specific times that we live in, and we've had these conversations in terms of the different perspectives, and you alluded to one of the driving values about you is achdus, and bringing people together, and just sort of finding common ground. And I know that in the beginning, like you alluded to with Hatzalah, that you have a whole bunch of different shitos out there. And what would you say, because I know that ultimately is the most important thing for you, is bringing people together. For all of us listening, myself included, how do you find the common ground to bring people together when you see that there's so many different ways that people can react? And how have you been able to walk away? We know that we're coming up to Purim, and the idea of Am Mefuzar Mefura, that our greatest downfall is when we're separated, and we should all come out of this ba'achdus. And sometimes you feel like it tears you into different directions. So I'm just curious what kind of mind processing you go through to keep Klal Yisrael together, especially at the head of Hatzalah, where so many people look to you from across the community. How do you find it? What's sort of the thought pattern in your head that keeps you focused on bringing Klal Yisrael together, and how we can really end up vayichan sham kish echad b'lev echad?
Rabbi, I wish I had the magic pill to bring achdus to Israel. I think for me, it boils down to just trying to treat people the way that you would want to be treated. It's sometimes it's just as simple as that, and recognizing that everybody's got their challenges and struggles, and you never really know what's beneath the surface. And so, we're all going through stuff all the time. And now especially, we're all going through so much. And so, you hear people say things and do things, and it's easy to be reactive. But, I think in our best moments, when we're the best versions of ourselves, we're able to take a step back. And, I'm hopeful that I'm able to do this more and more, that to recognize that, people are just trying their best and trying to live their life, with the same values that you're trying to live your life. And they may see things differently. And this is by no means trying to give anybody else aids. I'm talking to myself. But at the end of the day, we all want, a lot of the same things, and we're all dealing with a lot of challenges. And so just that element of kindness and trying to be down the cuffs good, and recognizing that Hashem wants to see us together. So the more that we can to make him happy and daven for us all to come together in a meaningful way, I think the better off we'll be.
You said that it's kind of simple, and it reminds me of the famous, I think it's the Kutzker says, our only job is to be a Pashut Yid, but it's not so Pashut to be a Pashut Yid. I think you continue to make it look easy, and I know how hard you work and how much there is to balance. And I know that our community, is beneficiary of that in a very intimate way. My own family from having that relationship, but I think it extends in so many different circles, as you've alluded to from some of the stuff that you've done. Just when a person puts MS out there and is really MS in why they're putting MS out there, it makes a roshem, makes an impact. So I just want to give you a bracha that you should continue to be able to do what you do for Klal Yisrael and all of the Eibishter's, Bria, and the Anivus and the emistic and the Avas Yisrael is something that I continue and our community continues to benefit from, and you should be zocha to continue to spread that in all the places that you do. So thanks for spending time. This was a nice treat. We don't really get to go out ever, so this is the best that we can do, and I really enjoyed that. And Reb David, I want to thank you for the opportunity. If you're still there, I'm not sure if you went off to.
I am right here. Right here the whole time. Rav Rafi, Dr. Ari, thank you so much for letting us into this window, into this conversation. I speak on behalf of everyone. When I say I had a very uplifting, meaningful time. For those of you who for the first time, please, we're here every Moshe Shabbos through the winter, ou.org/conversations. If you missed part of this or want to share this with somebody, the recording is going to be up on YouTube and on OU Torah very soon. In the meantime, have a Shavua Tov.
Thank you, Reb David. Thank you, Rabbi Rafi.
Thank you.